I like to start with stories. And I like three stories. Story number one, I tell people that I'm an only child. And when I tell them that I'm an only child, I somehow make sense to them. And then I tell them one more story. Story number two is that not only am I an only child, I'm also a miracle child. My parents were supposed to be childless, and then I showed up 5 years after their marriage. And when I share that I'm a miracle child, then I really make sense. And then I tell them fact number three is that I'm an introvert. And then they get confused. Wait, how did that happen to you? You show up on LinkedIn every day, you share about your spouse, your children, your life, how you manage your legal department, how you build the future of law. How is that possible with being an introvert? Well, what we're going to talk about today is that LinkedIn is a place, a perfect place to show up no matter where you are on any spectrum. In my example, extroversion versus introversion, but however special you feel, LinkedIn is a perfect place to be. And it's a place that you can work with and make your own. If you take nothing else from this conversation, this is your big takeaway. Throughout the presentation, I'll share a few observations that you cannot chat GPT or Google. I will share some tips that may be a little bit more for beginners, and I'll share some advanced tips. But in the end, it's a place to experiment, and things that worked for me may or may not work for you. So I would like for you to come with an open mind and treat it as a dress rehearsal, and then be inspired to experiment. So I started on LinkedIn in 2004, 2005. And fun fact, LinkedIn was founded in 2002 and went live in 2003. So it is fair to say that I was there from almost the beginning. And I was always more active than normal, than average, although the average has been changing because the way people use LinkedIn has been changing, the platform has been evolving, change our societal norms change. So a lot has changed. So it's fair to say for the last 20 years, this has been a place where I grew up. It feels like home to me. I spent a lot of time there. And let's talk about why I'm not showing up on LinkedIn. Because I think this is important. Let's be very honest about it. One thing, I never cared about being popular. Not in high school, and definitely not after law school. I mean, if you lead a legal department and crave popularity, that's probably not a good fit for you. And if you're leading legal ops, that's definitely not a good fit for you. So let me tell you that popularity is not the reason. And it's definitely not because I count likes. I mean, at some point, many of us who graduated from law school or didn't, been working at various amazing places. Like, likes is not enough of a shiny object to make you post. It's just not. There are many more things we can achieve in our professional lives that like is just not enough. And then the third thing that people ask me all the time is, did you want to be an influencer? Now, there's a lot of working definitions of influencer. Let me define it for you and tell you why I never cared about it. I think of influencer as somebody who full-time gets up in the morning, does things on social media, and makes money exclusively or almost exclusively, or at least substantially. And let me tell you, that has never been my aim. I actually love practicing law. I love building the future of law. And I love telling people what to do. That's why I go to law school. So becoming an influencer was not nearly as exciting or sexy as doing what I am already trained and love doing. So those are not the reasons. So why be on LinkedIn? And the easy answer for most people is jobs. And it is certainly true for me. Fun fact, you'll notice that I love fun facts. Fun fact, Last 3 jobs, other than the one I have today. The one I have today, I got through acquisition. But the last 3 before, I got on LinkedIn and not on job posting. But because somebody reached out to me and said, Olga, you're perfect the way you are, and we need a gem like you to shine in our organization. And I said, oh, thank you. I'd love to do that. So here's a story of the job I got as a general counsel. I was a number 2 lawyer at an online dating company. Yes, I was helping people to fall in love. And this doesn't get any more noble as a lawyer. Part of my job was to review pickup lines. Not a joke. True story. Because when you are a lawyer at an online dating company, people do all kinds of stuff on a date. And if you connected them, you could be liable. So teaching people how to pick up is the thing that you do as a dating company. Anyway, I was reviewing pickup lines, an important job. I received a message on LinkedIn from a junior lawyer who says, Olga, I read your post. You were speaking at an event. I was very inspired by things you said. I learned from you. I couldn't approach you because you were surrounded by people. And then I went back to my department and I found out that the director of legal who hired me and I love is leaving. And I had a bright idea. I thought you could be our new general counsel and my mentor. And I'm thinking, wow, this woman knows how to write a pickup line. We're going to have to meet and talk about it. Now, I was a number 2 lawyer at the time. And yes, I had aspirations to be a general counsel. I thought I was a little too young. I mostly wanted to meet her in person. The long story short is that this woman advocated on my behalf to become the general counsel for this company, which I did. I did mentor her, in fact. She left me 2 years later to become a general counsel elsewhere. She's now on her 3rd job to be a general counsel and highly successful. So I think we both lived to our expectations. All of that happened on LinkedIn. I like to go to LinkedIn and sometimes check out my own profile. And the question I ask, is this who I am today, or at least aspire to be? Because sometimes when you write your profile 15 years ago, the person you are today is very different. So I invite you to, at least once a quarter, I do it every month, to look at your profile. Not all of it necessarily, not all at once, but at least parts of it. Whether it's your picture, whether it's your about section, whether it's about your experiences, how you frame them, your endorsements, whatever. Look at that profile, look at that avatar and ask, is this relatable? Does it smell like me? Or is it somebody else from 10 years ago and I'm no longer that person? Remember, LinkedIn changes, but you are also changing too. Many of you will write in your evaluations that this conference changed you. So from the lens of this operation, from this conversation and this conference, go back to your LinkedIn profile and ask, am I trending in the right way? So I have been consistently tweaking my LinkedIn profile quite regularly, and I consider myself to be a student of LinkedIn. And I intend to be this way because I know that the platform will be changing, and I know that I will be changing as well. And it's an opportunity-rich place. Yes, it is jobs, but it's so much more than this. Fun fact, this conversation would not be possible if I weren't on LinkedIn. That's an obvious thing. I'm not telling you anything you wouldn't be able to connect dots yourself. It's much more than that. Yes, it is speaking opportunities. Yes, it's writing. Yes, it's making sure I met Tyler, who lives in a different state during the pandemic and supported me and many other women on our journey of practicing law. Finding people like you who may not be in your zip code, may not be even in your country, is the most powerful thing in the world. Sharing knowledge, supporting one another, celebrating successes, collaborating, building stuff together, changing the future of law. How about that? How about changing the future of law together? Those are much more fun things to do when you have people who relate to you, who appreciate you for who you are, who allow you to show up as yourself in every conversation. So I'm going to share 3 observations that I find true as I have my adventures on LinkedIn. 1, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Many of us who gravitate toward legal profession are highly verbal. But the reality is, I can tell you that people respond to pictures. They do, especially pictures that have faces. Even if that face is of a stranger, we are wired to look at people's faces. And so whether it's a face of your colleagues, or something around an image that tells a story, that is something that's going to be very helpful for people to understand who you are. So if you go to my profile, and I invite you to go on LinkedIn and actually go to my profile and scroll through it, because I'm going to cover a couple of examples. The first thing you'll see is a banner, and this is the banner that you will see. And in that banner, I very clearly tell you why I get up in the morning. Yes in words, and yes in pictures, what that practically means, what I do. I love sharing my passion about the future of law. I love building it, and I love connecting with professionals who are sharing this important mission with me. And in no uncertain terms, this is the first thing you're going to find out about me when you go to my profile. If you keep scrolling down, you will see my picture, and actually you will see more than that. You will see a video. A video, by the way, I think is a very advanced tip. It took me about 18 years to be comfortable with the video. I would take a video of myself, and then I would be like, wow, that voice is annoying. And that hair has a personality of its own. It does. We now made peace. It only took a few decades. And I would pick myself apart, and then I would try to perfect the video, and then I would give up. But at some point, I continued doing it and giving up. But at some point, I was like, you know what? This is just me. In fact, by the way, there's a picture booth in this room, and a gentleman was taking a picture, and somebody said, oh, do you like what you see? And he said, that's just my face. When you get to a place where you're like, that's just me, that's just what I look in 3-dimensional space, that's a beautiful space to be. You embrace your imperfections, and you realize that greeting people at your profile with a video is actually wonderful. People love seeing other humans move through space. It's very satisfying. I cannot tell you how many people say, I really enjoyed that you waved at me. They may not even hear what I said. They just saw me wave. Observation number 2. The shortest distance between 2 humans is a story. You will forget everything I've said. You will remember how I got my first GC job, because I told you that through story. We're wired to remember stories. We're wired to tell stories. When you're upset, you tell a sequence of events. When you're excited, you tell a story. We remember lives through stories. In fact, the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves make who we are. And there are many opportunities on LinkedIn to tell stories. So if you scroll down my LinkedIn profile, there's a banner, there is a picture/video. If you scroll a little bit more down, there's an about section. It only took me 18 years to figure this out. Ready for this? You don't have to repeat in narrative form your chronological bullet points of your jobs in your bullet point. I know this seems obvious, but it took me 18 years to figure this out. I was looking at my about section, and I asked myself, basically everything that I tell you, like I had this job and I learned that and I did that, I basically tell you this in the bullet form. So if I want to make you suffer, I'll make you read it in narrative form. So it just takes you longer, so you really got it. That makes no sense. What I find useful is to actually frame why you get up in the morning, or what do you want to be known for, or what it is you're building. So in my case, building the future of law is very important. And the number one question people ask me is why? Like, how a woman named Olga gets to a point that she gets excited about the future of law. What happened in her childhood? Well, here's what happened in the childhood. I was born in a country that doesn't respect the rule of law. And when I was 13, I found myself in a candy land called Silicon Valley, where I observed two things: that rule of law matters. In fact, it completely changed the course of my life. And two, that law is behind technology. And hence the reason why I knew early on that I want to have adventures on the intersection of law and technology. And when I explain this makes sense. People like an explanation. Your colleagues want to understand who you are, what drives you, why you get up in the morning. And when you frame it as a story in your about section, it really helps them to relate to you and help and connect and be there for you. I tell stories in my posts. I love to travel. If you follow me, you will know that basically I treat travel as a sport. And if you actually travel with me, you will know that I treat it as a competitive sport. Because I get up at 6 and you're lucky to be home by 11. And if you come with me, it will be the best weight loss program you ever joined. You'll be trained for anything in life. That aside, I also love to garden. I grow roses and strawberries and all kinds of trees. Sometimes I also kill them in the process, but sometimes they thrive. So I found myself in Dubai in the garden. And I was just, I don't know how many people have been in this big garden in Dubai. Am I the only person here? It's beautiful. It's luscious. It's mind blowing anywhere in the world, especially when you realize that it is actually in the middle of a desert. So as I was walking and pretending to be a fairy and just taking pictures with anything I could find, I thought of myself, wow, if a garden could be this luscious in the middle of a desert, like you can be anybody. And I wrote about it in my LinkedIn post, and that resonated. That message, that business message that we can be anybody, and inspired by my passion for gardening, is a lot of people related to it. And the story of why I like to grow things. I also find sharing stories of vulnerability helps people and makes tighter connections. Now, I used to say for a long time that I'm very professional and I'm most definitely not confessional. I really, remember I'm an introvert. I'm also married to somebody who likes to be left alone. Let's just say this. I occasionally share his pictures, and it does test the strength of our marriage. So it is not natural for me to share with you my failures. I wish I had plenty. But I find that when I do, everyone raises their hand and tells me that they had that same experience. It turns out that failure is the most universal thing in the world. And learning lessons and struggling and having hardships and sharing what you learn and what worked, what didn't work, is the quickest way to make friends. Whether they will share their stories publicly in the comments or reach out to you or meet you 10 years later at the clock and say, remember that story you wrote a long time ago? I thought about it for all these years and I want to tell you this. This is the most interesting thing when people tell you things 10 years later, but it happens all the time. Stories, especially honest stories and lessons, touch people and touch their lives. I'm often asked, how do you measure success? If it's not likes, then what is it? And I've thought about it. For me, it is the quality of the conversations in my DM. I mean, this question is simple. Am I attracting the right people into my direct message? Are we having the right tenor of conversations that is helpful to both of us? And will we enjoy collaborating or meeting in person? And independent of how many likes or shares or views you have, if you're attracting people in your life that are like-minded and on the same mission, I deem the post or any showing up as success. And fun fact, as much as I do on LinkedIn that you can see, 95% of stuff you don't. It's actually happening privately. In my messenger, at Clock, at various other conferences, at various other calls, video, in person. Because to me, LinkedIn is just a conversation starter. That's just a very high quality hello. Observation number 3: when in doubt, be generous. Generosity is the best quality in a professional. If when you look back on your career, you remember people who spent time with you, people who share their expertise, people who share their network and introductions. LinkedIn is no different. LinkedIn is a place where you can be generous in many ways, kind of like in person. Yes, with your attention, with your introduction, with your time, with your expertise, and so much more, sharing your experiences. There are many places to be generous. My favorite place to be generous is with my monthly newsletter. So if you go through my profile, you'll see the banner, the headshot, and then there's going to be tiles that allows you to subscribe. I send a monthly newsletter to my in-house followers, general counsel, in-house operators, counsel, about leadership and technology and ways to persevere and thrive. Some 11,000 people receive from me what I essentially think of as a exercise in creativity. It has pictures, it has videos, it has many words. It is me reflecting on what's happening to us as in-house professionals. And many people respond back. They share their stories, they share resources, they have a conversation, they find it very helpful. And I find it to be a very good investment of my time because it leads to quality conversations on a consistent basis. But there are many other places to give on LinkedIn. You can endorse people, you can give recommendations, you can share your expertise in the post. You can also share your stories, your wins, your lessons. You can make introductions. You can amplify your colleagues. You can do a lot of things. There are many ways to be generous. And depending on your field, there's probably many more that I'm not mentioning. Generosity is contagious, and always remember it because generosity makes you feel good. So this is an example of me dancing. I love to dance. When I'm happy, I dance. I do a happy dance, and I have many versions of this happy dance. This is me dancing, and this is me sharing a story on the International Women's Day. How my parents had this tradition where my dad would bring my mother a bucket of tulips on the 8th of March. When I was 6, I felt wronged, and I said, "Where is my bucket?" I mean, she gets one. My dad looked at me and he said, "Give me a moment." He ran to the store and he returned back with a bucket of tulips for me. To be clear, I was 6. I was probably asking for actually the bucket, not the tulips. But that tradition continued until my dad passed away for like another 30 years. And it was actually an important point in my life because my dad was a patriarch. He was definitely a head of a household. This is a guy who was in charge of like 10,000 people and basically didn't get no very often. And here's a 6-year-old little girl asking him for a bucket, her bucket. And as somebody who knows how to lead people, he reflected on the situation and decided that I needed to be heard and validated and make sure that someone like myself knows that asking for something that is important to you is important. And over years, I realized that as I was becoming a leader and leading people and talking to my colleagues and really hearing them, I really do think that that was an example of leadership. I shared this story, and what followed many other stories of people who've been heard and how it makes them feel validated and inspired and get up in the morning and do their job better. So generosity is an important place to have in your career. And yes, LinkedIn is a perfect place to share it. So the reason I like LinkedIn is because it allows me to show up as myself. And I find it to be liberating. when I go to something like this conference or many others, the conversations I have are following. I'm a big fan of yours. I like that you did this and that. How can we collaborate? That's a much better conversation than tell me about yourself or awkward silence. Remember, I think of LinkedIn as a much better quality hello. So by the time we meet in real life, you probably know a lot about me. You probably know why I get up in the morning, what makes me tick and what makes me ticked off. You probably know a lot about my travel, my husband, my kids, all kinds of stuff, and things that I value in leaders. So our first conversation will be a high quality conversation. It will be something like, I'm a fan of your work. How can we work together? And that's why you show up on LinkedIn. I mean, remember, I'm a very specific person. And yes, I don't mean just, my name is Olga. How many of you know other Olgas in your life? For many of you, I'm like the first Olga you met. But it's not that. It's much more than that. I have a very narrow hobby, specific passions. I don't like to say I'm different or weird because there's one judgy term. And to be completely honest, I'm like totally normal to me. I'm the only Olga I know. I don't feel any different. I've known myself for a couple of decades. And what I find liberating is that I can show up on LinkedIn as myself because I've been showing up as that kind of Olga for the last 2 decades. What I find is that consistency normalizes differences. People just accepted the fact that Olga is just a little not mainstream, a very specific Olga, and they just expect that. It may initially be obvious and stand out, but over time, that's just an expectation. And I love that. Consistency changes expectations. It allows you to have conversations and attract opportunities that are specific to you, that allow you to show up as yourself. And I'm not sure what else can be more liberating than this. I love the fact that the last 3 jobs, I wrote my own job description. I love when people say, you're very specific. We can use talent like yours on our team for this project, for this mission impossible, for this cool thing to do. What do you think? And can you help us write a better description that really takes advantage of your talent? Isn't that like the ultimate compliment? To be seen, to be heard, to be appreciated for who you are, as opposed to be like, hey, this is the mold, go fit in. I don't know about you, but fitting in is just kind of uncomfortable. It's much more comfortable to show up as yourself because the expectation has been set for 30 years. Olga comes with a full disclosure. If you want to know what a full disclosure looks like, go to my LinkedIn profile. You will see the exact full disclosure of everything I believe, why I get up in the morning, how I feel every single day, and what makes me excited. So show up as yourself. Make sure that people know who you are, appreciate you for who you are, be consistent, be generous, tell stories, and use pictures. If you want to have more tips about how to be generous on LinkedIn, I prepared a handout for you. You can download a digital copy and it could be yours. I am here to answer questions that you may have. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Let's continue this conversation in person, on DM, on LinkedIn. Let's make sure that LinkedIn is a place where we allow folks to show up as themselves and thrive. Thank you very much. I look forward to have conversations with you.